Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Grace, and this is the KMG show. We're all kneeling now, apparently. Nancy Pelosi is leaning, Chuck Schumer kneeling. Chuck Schumer is kneeling. Jerry Nadler, I guess he's not capable of kneeling. Jacob Frey, the mayor of Minneapolis, kneeling. Justin Trudeau, kneeling. Everybody is kneeling. But before I get into that, just a remarkably infuriating story here from CNBC. Coronavirus patients without symptoms aren't driving the spread of the virus, World Health Organization officials said Monday, casting doubt on concerns by some researchers that the disease could be difficult to contain due to asymptomatic infections. Some people, particularly young and otherwise healthy individuals who are infected by the coronavirus, never develop symptoms or only develop mild symptoms. Others might not develop symptoms until days after they were actually infected. Preliminary evidence from the earliest outbreaks indicated that the virus could spread from person-to-person contact, even if the carrier didn't have symptoms. But WHO officials now say that while asymptomatic spread can occur, it's not the main way it's being transmitted. Quote, from the data we have, it still seems to be rare that an asymptomatic person actually transmits onward to a secondary individual, Dr. Maria van Kerkhove, head of the WHO's Emerging Diseases and Zoonosis Unit, said at a news briefing from the United Nations Agency's Geneva headquarters. It's very rare. So, I guess the whole point of the lockdown was a mistake. And we're still having people being censored by social media because they're spreading misinformation. But the biggest spreader of misinformation in this whole sorry affair is the World Health Organization. They made they led governments to make momentous decisions with terrible consequences, and we're nowhere near learning just how terrible those consequences are going to be. And it turns out that they were making these pontifications based on rubbish evidence. But will they pay for this? Well, Trump has announced that the United Nations is severing ties with the World Health Organization. But certainly my country of Canada is still on board. Maybe Boris Johnson could use this news story as an excuse to just resign, because he's been absolutely pitiful as Prime Minister of Great Britain. I don't know why anyone would have expected him to do differently. This is from Breitbart. Watch, Nancy Pelosi Democrats kneel to protest police brutality. The Democratic lawmakers took a knee and a corresponding moment of silence for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in Emancipation Hall at the U.S. Capitol on Monday in honor of George Floyd, and to respect the actions of the American people to speak out against the consequences of slavery, which ended in 1865, and racism, specifically manifested in police brutality. Of course, it's been demonstrated again and again, not that it matters, but the police in the United States are more brutal to white people than they are to blacks, not just in absolute numbers, but proportionately as well. Pelosi, alongside several Democratic lawmakers, including Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senator Kamala Harris, and Senator Cory Booker, gathered in Emancipation Hall and took a knee for 8.46, the same amount of time former officer Derek Chauvin, who's been charged with second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter, kneeled on Floyd's neck. Prior to the moment of silence, Pelosi noted that Democrats, under the leadership of Congressional Black Caucus Chairwoman Karen Bass, traveled to Ghana last summer to observe the 400th anniversary of the first slaves coming across the Atlantic. That tragedy, that hour of history, slavery in our own country, and then all the consequences of that, Pelosi began. We are here to observe that pain. We are here to respect the actions of the American people, to speak out against that, specifically manifested in police brutality. We are here to honor George Floyd and so many others who lost their lives and were abused by police brutality. Pelosi read off a host of names, including Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Freddie Gray, Michael Brown. You remember him, the gentle giant who strong-armed an Asian store owner for a $50 box of cigar, and then later assaulted a cop in his cop car. You remember him? Oh, Trayvon Martin, little Trayvon Martin. He couldn't be limited apparently, but he was limited by George Zimmerman, and a court found that Zimmerman had acted in self-defense. Yes, they donned kente cloth scarves, and I was curious about this. Also, the reference to Ghana. The kente cloth was worn by the Ashanti or Asante people of Ghana, who were slaveholders. Their slaves were mostly those of other tribes who were taken in war. The Ashanti were very warlike people and very successful for quite some time in Africa because of their prowess, military prowess. And when the Portuguese came into contact with what later became known as the Gold Coast, the Ashanti discovered that they could make money selling black people to white people. And I don't know whether Nancy Pelosi knows about the associations of the kente cloth or whether it would make any difference to her. But I find it odd and sad that here you have these people honoring the people who captured them and sold them into bondage across the Atlantic Ocean. Let's see. Oh, yes, I should mention that one of these Democratic lawmakers, I don't know her name. If you've seen the video, she's wearing a pink dress. She almost made a face plant. Probably not a good idea to have worn heels on that day. And Nancy Pelosi, of course, found it very difficult to get up and had to be helped to do so. I'm kneeling and I can't get up. I think that pretty much sums up the situation in the United States today. Of course, there's one person who is not going to kneel, and that is Donald Trump. Law and order, he says every day on his Twitter feed, and I'm going to be talking about his Twitter feed a little later. And I'm going to be talking about eliminating police departments, because of course that's what you want to do, obviously. Piers Morgan, or Piers Moron, as he is known in Britain, writes in the Daily Mail, if you really want to show America you care about race and national unity, President Trump, then take the knee live on TV in the Oval Office. Piers Moron really is a stupid person. He doesn't seem to understand that if Trump did take the knee in the Oval Office, that would be it. There's no possible way he could be reelected president. Oh, and let's see. There was a barbecue in the town of Griffith, Indiana yesterday. It was probably the most unusual and unexpected barbecue in U.S. history. More than 400 people gathered in Central Park to protest about the murder of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. They held banners with slogans like Black Lives Matter and racism, colors should be celebrated, all colors except white, serve and protect, and even defund the police and defend the people. And they kept up a steady stream of no lives matter until Black Lives Matter. And I can't breathe. Marvin Gaye's What's Going On rang out in the background. So far, so typical of many other protests in towns and cities all across America, but this one had an extraordinary twist to it. As the protesters did their thing, officers from the Griffith Police Department stood aside peacefully, patiently, and non-confrontationally. They even helped fire up some grills, cook some hot dogs, and feed the protesters. This isn't remarkable at all. This sort of thing is going on all over America, including policemen kneeling in solidarity. Enough of Piers Moron. Let's see. Of course, the left, the progressives, are in charge of Minneapolis and have been in charge of Minneapolis for a long time. But somehow there must be some sort of revolution in Minneapolis. So what, all the progressives are going to resign? Well, maybe they should. Maybe the progressives should agree to support a Black Lives Matter slate in the next civic election. Jacob Fry just made an ass of himself over the weekend, going up to a protest, and it was demanded of him whether he was in favor of defunding the police, and he said no, he wasn't. So the crowd, several hundred or several thousand strong, jeered him and ordered him to leave. Sometime over the weekend, he was filmed doing some sort of hokey pokey dance with a bunch of protesters. Very cringe. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry on Monday balked at claims made by city council members that they vowed to dismantle the police department as President Trump weighed in on the increasing number of cities that are reducing funding to police departments amid growing national outcry over police brutality. On Sunday, officials including Ilhan Omar and the son of the Attorney General prosecuting the 4 cops responsible for Floyd's death signed a pledge vowing to take it apart. I should point out here that the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, is on record as being a supporter of Antifa. He later deleted the tweet where he was shown holding a book called Antifa, which he said strikes terror in Trump's heart. His son, who was on Minneapolis City Council, said openly, and I don't believe that he has taken this off Twitter, that yes, he supports Antifa. Let's see. The president on Monday morning tweeted, "Law and order, not defund and abolish the police. The radical left Democrats have gone crazy." He later added, "This year has seen the lowest crime numbers in our country's recorded history, and now the radical left Democrats want to defund and abandon our police. Sorry, I want law and order." I'm a big supporter of Donald Trump, as everyone who listens to this live stream knows, but it seems pretty clear to me that one of the reasons why America would have such a low crime rate this year is because tens of millions of them were locked into their homes for months. Mayor Fry appeared on Good Morning America to say that he would not support the plan to disband the department, and he wanted to know exactly what the council had in mind. Officials at the rally Sunday said they had enough votes on the council vote to secure a majority. By law, Minneapolis must maintain a police force of at least 723 police officers. It currently has some 800. To completely get rid of the department, the city charter would have to be amended, which would require a public vote or the full approval of all 13 council members, including the mayor. The council members who want to take the toxic police department apart have not yet proposed how they would replace it. They said they'd speak with community leaders and members of the public before forming any sort of real plan. Probably a good idea to formulate a real plan before you actually publicly call for the dismantling of the police department. And I'm looking at a picture of Jacob Fry here wearing a mask that says, "I can't breathe." He cuts a very sad figure indeed. I mean, why hasn't he resigned? He presided over a disaster. If he moved quickly against the rioters, well, I suppose large parts of America wouldn't have burned down. Council President Lisa Bender told CNN on Sunday that there are no plans to get rid of the police force in the short term, but that city leaders are committed long-term to dismantling policing as we know it and to rebuild with our community a new model of public safety that actually keeps our community safe. Bender addressed crowds in Powderhorn Park, just blocks away from where Floyd was filmed suffocating to death while being knelt on by police officers for 9 minutes. "We're here because we hear you. We are here today because George Floyd was killed by the Minneapolis police. We are here because here in Minneapolis and in cities across the United States, it is clear that our existing system of policing and public safety is not keeping our communities safe." Representative Omar led the calls to disband it. "I will never stop saying not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department, which is rotten to the root. And so when we dismantle it, we get rid of that cancer and allow for something beautiful to rise. And that reimagining allows us to figure out what the public safety looks like for us. Jeremiah Allison tweeted, "We are going to dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. And when we're done, we're not simply gonna glue it back together. We're going to dramatically rethink how we approach public safety and emergency response. It's really past due." It was brought to my attention by Faith Goldie a couple of days ago that apparently Black Lives Matter is genderqueer, whatever that means. I think it means the same as gay, only nastier. Let's see more from Lisa Bender. Minneapolis City Council president is defending the move to disband the city's police department following the brutal killing of George Floyd, saying that police can do more harm than good in some cases, and expecting their help comes from a place of privilege. On Monday, City Council President Lisa Bender defended the revolutionary move to disband the police force, saying Floyd's death was a wake-up call that the police is not keeping every member of our community safe. "What if, in the middle of the night, my home is broken into? Who do I call?" CNN's Alison Camerata asked. Bender replied, "Yes, I mean that. I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege. Because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality where calling the police may mean more harm is done." Well, of course, if Lisa Bender really wants to know what it is like, then she can move from whatever Tony neighborhood she lives in currently to the inner city. And I'm sure that would be a very droll experience for her. I was struck by something that Steve Saylor tweeted today, and I'll just go there now. Everything old is new again, as they say. And we have, or Americans have been through this before. After the riots of the 1960s, there were calls to, rethink, reimagine policing, and too many people were being arrested. Too many black people especially were being arrested. And he pointed out that it was this kind of change, these kinds of ideas, led from New York being the city where Splendor in the Grass was filmed in 1961, and by 1976 you had Scorsese's Taxi Driver. Of course, other such films earlier in the 70s, The French Connection in 1971, The Panic in Needle Park, I believe, in 1971. And I don't know if the people of Minneapolis really want to live through that experiment. Well, all I can say is welcome to hell, Scandi Cucks. Let's have a look at the chat, see what's going on there. They're clapping again. Yeah, it doesn't seem there's many people as clapping as were previously. William Hicks says, "Good evening, Kevin. An excerpt from the AP News. Several cities have also lifted curfews, including Chicago and New York City, where the governor urged protesters to get tested for the virus." What pretty much every leader now has broken their own recommendations, their own laws about assembling in large numbers in public. And of course, COVID-19 is a very clever virus because there's certain people it doesn't attack because they are righteous. Mike F. says, prediction, NFL next season will stop opening week games at 8:46 in first quarter. Everybody will take knee. That is a very good prediction. I must say, I'm going to have a little something to say about the NFL a little later. Donald Robertson says, why kneel for a lie? Well, it's a myth. It's a powerful lie. In this case, Chogokin666 said, you see that protester torture a puppy on live TV? I did see it. Apparently there's a bounty out for him. David the Gnome says, I honestly don't understand what they mean by removing police from Minneapolis. I will get to the specifics in just a minute. How can people protest a murder that might not have occurred? Well, I mean, the judgment is already in that Chauvin is guilty, and given that Keith Ellison is the Attorney General, it's going to be a kangaroo court, although they're going to be hard-pressed to convict him on second-degree murder. They're going to be really hard-pressed. Maybe that's part of the plan, that these officers get off, or some of them get off, and then we get more riots. YT, none of the animal rights organizations made a sound about the puppy or the horses. Instead, they all posted BLM stuff. No feminists spoke out about that girl who got on her knees on a street when a person of a certain race asked her. I've seen the video, and it appears that, he was just trolling. He was playing a joke, but he was rather taken aback by the alacrity with which these white women decided to abase themselves in front of him. Spiracy says, have police handle violent crimes only. Well, you see, a lot of these things escalate. So, it's difficult to know how violent things are going to be. Chogakin66, make Minneapolis Somalia. Well, it's happening already. Although it was reported last week that the Somalis banded together in order to protect their businesses from black rioters. Oh, septum ring. Yes. Have you seen the pictures of, what's her name? Sharia de Blasio? The daughter of Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York City. I mean, I've seen before and after pictures, and she had this kind of interesting exotic look. And now she's got kind of a faux hawk thing going with a bunch of hair just in the middle coming up. And she has the ring through the septum, inviting people to regard her as a beast of burden, like an ox. John Miller, the NFL is so dead. Someone called Big T's says, why is Seth Rogen such a cuck? I don't know, perhaps because he grew up in Vancouver. Okay. Let's get back to it here. Let's get back to it. So what is it that they want? According to the Daily Mail, an end to traffic stops, street outreach teams, unionized sex workers, and burglaries resolved by restorative justice. The vision of BLM activists for how to defund and replace traditional police. Calls to defund the police are met with action from city mayors and councils. Minneapolis City Council said 911 calls analyzed to see what help was asked for. They found most people needed health care, EMTs, or fire. Fire? Not armed police. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said oversized military budgets allowed police to use tanks. Yes, I've heard that American police have tanks. I certainly haven't seen any on the streets in the last couple of weeks. Okay, some points. Mental health responders to attend mental health crisis in place of armed police. Okay, so mental health responders go out there when they have a call about a disturbed person yelling, screaming, making threats, breaking things. And what happens when that disturbed person decides to attack the mental health responder or responders? Presumably, these people will be unarmed. Street outreach teams, more shelters and affordable housing to help solve homelessness and stop the homeless from being criminalized. I think the bigger problem is the homeless criminalizing others. Traffic stops to be eliminated entirely, with traffic violations dealt with via mail. Maybe they could just get rid of traffic lights, stop signs, and the like. And then, people wouldn't be guilty of any of these crimes. I think that's, I think that's an interesting idea. Community members to attend domestic violence calls. Oh, geez. to help intervene and establish long-term safety for the individuals. One of the reasons that police are called so often for cases of domestic violence is that their neighbors or family members or whatever are too frightened to deal with the situation themselves and are worried about violence at first hand. Specialized physical and emotional support for victims of sexual violence. Doesn't that exist already? Investing in prevention of sex trafficking to end economic and social conditions that lead to deeply rooted vulnerabilities. Well, if they're going to make prostitution legal and in fact have sex workers unions, then what you're going to get is sex trafficking. We've seen it. We see it today in the Netherlands and in Germany, where young women are effectively kidnapped from Eastern Europe and other places, and they live as sex slaves. Is that what Americans want? The legalization of marijuana to stop incarceration for the harmless drug, better handling of drug offenses to stop criminalizing of communities of color, decriminalization of sex work and formation of an independent union to ensure individuals have insurance, childcare, and safety precautions, restorative justice meetings between victim and offender to be used to deal with property crimes such as theft and burglary. Well, if the police aren't going to be out there trying to, arrest burglars and robbers, how will they get these people to take part in this restorative justice? Are we supposed to believe that they're going to volunteer? Oh, by the way, here's the stuff that I stole from you. And I just thought it'd be nice if we had a little chat so I could tell you just how terribly sorry I am. State and local governments spent $115 billion on policing in 2017, according to data compiled by the Urban Institute. And then we hear from Lisa Bender again, who said that the city, with $1 billion annual budget, had analyzed 911 calls to determine what help people in Minneapolis were calling for. They found most people needed mental health services, EMT, or fire services, not an armed police officer. She added, housing, healthcare, education, all of it together that helps keep our community safe and to really work with our community over the next year. So imagine what that looks like to build that system, including everyone. Mayor de Blasio to cut funds from the New York Police Department for social services. I've heard, between $100 and $150 million. Shift funding from NYPD to youth and social services. Transparency in police discipline. More vendor enforcement out of NYPD. I don't know what that means. Bring community voices into the senior level of the NYPD. Oh, that's just going to be absolutely hilarious. With these community voices shouting, "Shut up, pigs," every time the police try to make a point. But again, that's what the good people of Minneapolis want. I think they should get it good and hard. And as for anyone possibly finding themselves in that situation, living in a city which decides to go down that route, you got to leave. You have to get out. Get out as soon as you can. Because how are you going to protect yourselves? They're going to want your stuff. Bad people are going to want your stuff. And if the police aren't there to prevent it in any way or to go after these people, what are you going to do? Defend yourself? That's very highly risky in both meanings of the word nowadays. Private security? Well, I guess everyone can have private security, but what private security can do is rather circumscribed. Turn your houses into fortresses? I suspect that is coming up next in South Africa for quite some time, and I'm not making this up. People have retrofitted their cars such that flame comes from the bottom up the sides to deter carjacking. But of course, it's just property, and everyone knows that property's not important. Oh, by the way, senior editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer was canned because an op-ed was run saying that property matters too. And of course, two senior editors of the New York Times have been canned because they ran an op-ed piece by a standing U.S. senator. Representative Karen Bass, a Democrat from California and chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, said part of the movement is really about how money is spent. Now, I don't believe that you should disband police departments, she said to CNN, but I do think that in cities and states, we need to look at how we are spending the resources and invest more in our communities. That was one of the big ideas from the 1960s. Programs, more money for Dem programs. And how much money has been spent on Dem programs since the 1960s? Hundreds of billions? Trillions of dollars? In Chicago, they've gone so far as to actually bring gang members, gang leaders into the whole community activist scam. Doesn't seem to have made much difference in Chicago, where the murder rate is looking really, really good. I mean, it's looking good in the sense that murders appear to be out of control. Let's see, groups such as MPD 150 are working towards this by presenting a practical pathway for the dismantling of police departments. This involves the transference of its social service functions to community-based agencies and organizations, the replacement of its emergency intervention functions with models not based on military methods, and the redirection of resources to support community resilience and people-directed development. Does any of that make any sense? I'm hearing the phonemes, but it doesn't mean anything. A lot of mental health activists are of the position that what we call mental health is an oppression of the poor, oppression of people who are different. So you would expect mental health advocates to protect people who are at risk from people who are screaming, yelling, breaking stuff, making blood-curdling threats, etc. Okay, so moving on. Oh, yeah. This is from John Cardillo. 2 female NYPD cops stand down. One runs away and abandons her partner and allow a store to be robbed at knife point right in front of them. This is what Bill de Blasio and NYPD Shea have turned the NYPD into. Fire all of these useless cowards today. It really is both a disturbing and an amusing video. And of course, women should not be police officers. They simply do not have a physically intimidating presence. And as a result, they're far more likely to pull their guns. And that's something that you don't want to happen unless it is absolutely necessary. But it's been pointed out to me that I made a prediction last week that soon enough that we would see police actually supervising the safe looting of businesses, and we're almost there. We're almost there. Jim Kunstler. I should mention that Jim Kunstler is a lifelong Democrat. He is what you would call a leftist, a lefty of the old school. He's not very happy with what has happened to the left. And, well, I suppose none of the old school lefties are, because it's all become about identity politics and the needs of what used to be called the working class. Well, no one cares about them anymore. The great many of these working class people are white. And so why would the left want to help them? Kunstler writes today, the occasion of the state funeral for the late George Floyd, rivaling the solemn progress of Abraham Lincoln's casket across this land at lilac time so long ago, may be a good moment for Americans to take stock of what condition our condition is in. Going on a fortnight of protests, riots, and looting, what exactly does Black America seek in its cry for an end to systemic racism? Forgive me for saying the petition is vague. To explain, I'll have to tread into realms of discourse that are taboo these days, so gird your loins if you care to follow. Is there a campaign of police genocide against Black people? The facts and numbers say emphatically no. They're discussed in detail in many articles by Heather McDonald at City Journal. Is it true that Black people aren't heard? If you follow the New York Times, America's newspaper of record, that's all you will hear. Has justice been denied in the killing of Mr. Floyd? 4 cops have been swiftly arraigned on grave charges. Are Black people denied the privilege of governing their own affairs? Many cities are run by Black mayors, police chiefs, and district attorneys where, year by year, social dysfunction has only gotten worse. Is a substantial portion of the Black population not thriving in comparison to whites and other racial or ethnic groups? Apparently so. The only truly systemic dynamic in their plight is the campaign by government, ongoing for more than 50 years, to uplift them with social programs, cash assistance, and affirmative action, plus monuments, prizes, and holidays, and very vocal public encouragement from allies in media, entertainment, and sports. All this help only seems to make the problems worse. It's beyond obvious, after half a century and trillions of dollars spent, that well-intentioned government support destroyed Black family formation. 75% of Black children are raised these days in households without fathers because cash assistance is forbidden where there is a man in the house. Everybody knows the problem is generational and severe. Paying unmarried women, often just girls, to have babies can easily be seen as leading to many social disadvantages. Who is militating to change that? Say, to allow cash assistance to married couples? Nobody, most particularly Black America. Why? Because it's an established racket, a hustle, a pattern of living complete with customs and rituals such as giving over young Black men to prison as an initiation to manhood. Why are they sent to prison? Because they commit crimes. The bamboozlement over this was especially vivid last week in the contrast between the sanctimony of the daytime protest marches and the nighttime looting, vandalism, and arson, of which there are hundreds of videos on the web showing young Black Americans acting like savages. The police all over America didn't dare to try to stop it, lest they produce a new martyr to aggravate the insurrection. No plea arose from leaders in Black communities across the land to stop the disgraceful behavior. It was not even recognized as disgraceful, rather regarded as a necessary ceremony for purging the bad feelings over George Floyd's gruesome death at the knee of Officer Derek Chauvin. Why not try succeeding at school rather than prison? School has different requirements. I will venture an idea which is not just taboo, but taboo to an extreme. Many Black children cannot succeed in school because they do not speak English correctly at home, and the schools have, as a definite policy, done nothing to correct that, because it would be labeled as racist. If your language dispenses with grammatical form, such as the difference between the expression of past, present, and future, you're liable to suffer cognitive disadvantages which result in doing poorly at school. You may even be incapable of showing up on time for anything. The number one job in elementary school should be teaching children first to speak English, because without it, they'll struggle to learn anything else, but we're not interested. It might hurt someone's feelings to learn that his or her speech is deficient. It might anger a parent to hear that. So we choose to let the children fail. It's a choice we make by consensus. Here's some news for you. Multiculturalism is itself a form of racism that ghettoizes language. Do you want that to continue? Are you really interested in change? Change that. Start there. This points to a deeper and more fundamental question. Does Black America really want to fully participate in our national life, or do they want to remain an oppositional faction within it, dependent, resentful, and violent? The George Floyd fiasco has distracted the country from the most severe economic crisis of the century so far. Do you understand how much thought and effort it will take to reorganize America's economic life? We are not going back to the way things were before the year 2020. A lot of familiar arrangements will not continue. Comforts and conveniences are phasing out. We don't have time for histrionics. Can we please just respectfully bury this troubled man and get on with the task at hand? I wonder about that. I seriously wonder about that, for the reason that, there's going to, when this dies down, there's going to be a tremendous letdown. Because a lot of people ask themselves, well, exactly what was it for? What was it all about? Our neighborhoods have been destroyed, and yet we are no better off. All these people are taking knees but how does that improve conditions in the inner city? But of course, in the thrill of the act, in the thrill of violence, no one is thinking long-term about this. The Portland police chief resigns amid George Floyd protests. This is from SF Gate. An African-American lieutenant on the force replaced her. And you will have noticed that there's not very many Black people in Portland. There's not very many Black people in Seattle. There's not very many Black people in San Francisco. But it seems to be kind of an unofficial rule that police departments, at least in Democratic Party controlled parts of America, must be Black, and preferably they should be Black women. To say this was unexpected would be an understatement. New Police Chief Chuck Lovell said at a news conference, "I'm humbled. I'm going to listen. I'm going to care about the community, and I'm looking forward to this journey." He and community leaders of color credited Jamie Resch, a white woman, for stepping down as George Floyd protests roiled the city. Resch told the news conference that Lovell is the exact right person at the exact right moment to head the police department. Resch had replaced Danielle Outlaw, who was Portland's first Asian American female police chief and who became Philadelphia police commissioner in February. And of course, it's lit in Philadelphia. Resch said she suggested the shakeup to Mayor Ted Wheeler, who said he supported Lovell to lead the department as it moves through needed reforms. We must reimagine reform and rebuild what public safety looks like. Lovell served as Outlaw's executive assistant. Under Resch, he led a new community services division that included the behavioral health unit, the Oregonian reported. The unit's mission, according to its web page, is to aid people in crises resulting from mental illness and or drug and alcohol addiction. Resch said she will stay with the department in a different role. What? What different role? She got to the top. She couldn't handle it. She quit. So they're going to make her vice president of diversity or something like that. Apparently, we have a new person who is being tipped to be Joe Biden's Black female Veep pick. It's the mayor of Atlanta who rejoices in the comical name of Keisha Lance Bottoms. I suppose she kept the Lance because her father was a soul star, at least a minor soul star of the 60s and 70s. He was called Major Lance. But the name Lance Bottoms, come. That is just too filthy. She has said that she was simply disgusted by President Donald Trump's invoking George Floyd's name during a Friday bill signing ceremony touting the latest job reports, which exceeded economists' expectations. Yeah, see, the media has decided to make up a big lie here that Donald Trump, that his message about George Floyd was job numbers are looking good. They're two separate things. Now, Donald Trump has gone so far as to talk about George Floyd looking down on us, presumably from heaven. He's done his share of pandering, and no question about it, but it is never enough. I think if the president was going to say anything, it may have been more appropriate to talk about his family, Bottom said in an interview with Dana Bash on CNN. It just shows that this president is capable of showing any kind of empathy. He always gets it wrong time and time again, and I think we've got to stop expecting any more from him. This is the word, the buzzword of the week that went out on the memo that all people get. Empathy, empathy, empathy. Trump has no empathy. And first of all, how do we know that Trump has no empathy? I've seen him at his rallies. He seems to have a lot of empathy for his supporters. When he was talking about that woman or any of the other Americans who've been killed by illegal immigrants, he seems to have an awful lot of empathy for them and their relatives. Trump's comment about Floyd looking down was included in unwieldy and unprepared remarks in which he devoted a significant portion to praising the job law enforcement was doing to quell protesters and urging some states to activate the National Guard. Speaking in reference to Floyd, Trump maintained that equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. I mean, that couldn't be any clearer. Could it? Could it? But apparently, Mayor Bottoms was very upset about the violence which has broken out in Atlanta, pointing out that Atlanta was not one of the cities that was nearly burned to the ground after the sainted Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered in 1968. Apparently, another one of these long shots is Florida Representative Val Demings. Okay, I've never heard of that woman. I suppose it doesn't make any difference because it's entirely symbolic. Let's see. Carol Moseley Braun, who was the first African-American woman to serve in the Senate and is a Biden surrogate, she says the time for the old playbook of getting geographic balance on the ticket has gone out the window with Sarah Palin. Alaska, that's pretty balancing because it's way up there. These are extraordinary times. Joe is an extraordinary candidate. Well, he is in one sense. The only way he's going to get the voters energized is to have a black woman candidate, a black woman for vice president. How about having a black woman for president? How about that? The vice president is typically a thankless job. John Nance Garner famously said it was about as much good as a warm pitcher of piss. And, he was vice president for 8 years. Just 10 days ago, top Biden surrogates pointed to Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar as a leading contender because of her appeal as a moderate from the Midwest. But her star has fallen in the wake of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis. Social justice activists have been sharply critical of Klobuchar's past record as a Minneapolis area prosecutor. Uh-oh. She put black people in prison. Moseley Braun says it's not just a signal, it's a cry. It's a cry from the heart from American people. We need to move into another direction. We need to repudiate white supremacy. Yes, there's no more phenomenon that speaks white supremacy, that for 2 weeks, black people going berserk in the streets, attacking police, attacking store owners, looting and burning. Yes, that's got white supremacy written all over it. Oh, Michelle Obama. And I see here, okay, yes. She was at the 2019 Essence Festival at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. Mercedes-Benz Superdome. Fight the power, Michelle. In a virtual commencement speech to 2020 high school and college graduates posted online, former First Lady Michelle Obama addresses the recent unrest in America, specifically the issue of racial disparity. Now, of course, if it weren't for the racial disparity of affirmative action, Obama would be teaching law at some community college somewhere, and Michelle Obama would be working for the DMV. But she doesn't seem to understand that. In the light of the current state of our country, I struggled to find the right words of wisdom for you today. She said, I'm here today to talk to you not as the former First Lady, but yes, that is why, because that's the only reason why anyone would possibly be interested in you, because you are a woman who has no accomplishments. Your accomplishment was marrying the boss. But she says she speaks as a real live person, a mother, a mentor. Oh, really? A citizen concerned about your future and the future of our country, as long as she gets paid. Apparently, her husband's going to be the first billionaire, ex-president. Oh, I'm exhausted by a heartbreak that never seems to stop. Once again, all of these people are tired. They're so tired. They're more than tired. They're exhausted. Well, I think that if you're really that exhausted, you're not going around everywhere making speeches. So what exhausted people do. Can this woman go 1 week without inserting herself into the headlines? Let's see, over these past couple of months, our foundation has been shaken, not just by a pandemic that stole too many of our loved ones, upended our daily lives, and sent tens of millions into unemployment, but also by the rumbling of the age-old fault lines that our country was built with, the lines of race and power that are now once again so nakedly exposed for all of us to grapple with. For those of you who feel invisible, please know that your story matters, your ideas matter. Oh, and what idea is expressed by looting and burning, by the way? Your experiences matter. Your vision for what our world can and should be matters. So don't ever let anyone tell you that you're too angry or that you should keep your mouth shut. Who is saying that now? Exactly. Who is saying that? If you don't feel safe driving your own car in your own neighborhood or going for a jog, ho ho, or buying some candy at 7-Eleven, oh, I guess that would be a reference to St. Trayvon Martin, or bird watching, yeah, that's what the gay activist was doing in Central Park, bird watching. If you can't even approach the police without fearing for your life, well, at least up until 2 weeks ago, Black people approached the police without fearing for their life many, many thousands of times each week. How do you even begin to chart your own course? She sounds as if she's talking to a bunch of young aristocrats, all of this charting your own course and your ideas changing the world. Most normal people just want to find a job and get a decent place to live. Oh, scientists funded by Mark Zuckerberg urge Facebook to clamp down on Trump's incendiary speech and rein in hate on the social media platform. Scientists conducting Zuckerberg-funded research say Facebook should not let Trump use the platform to spread misinformation, which is things that they disagree with. Yeah, so what is their current position on the transmissibility of COVID-19? Because it goes like this. It's been going like this since January. The scientists had been backed by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, a research nonprofit backed by Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla. And her name comes first. Again, she married the boss, but her name comes first. The researchers, including 60 professors at leading US research institutions, wrote to the Facebook CEO on Saturday, asking Zuckerberg to consider stricter policies on misinformation and incendiary language that harms people, especially during the current turmoil over racial injustice. And I guess that words hurt people more than, say, being knocked unconscious with a 2x4 or being kicked to death on the streets. As I have predicted, what these people are actually saying is that racism is a public health crisis, and therefore public health experts should be given the power to censor speech. I see Deborah Marks of Harvard Medical School was one of 3 professors who helped organize the letter. I think we've all had enough of experts for a while, haven't we? If I never again hear the word epidemiologists, I will be happy. Oh, and what does another very rich man have to say? The richest man in the world. I was looking at the Daily Mail on the weekend, and let's see, Jeff Bezos paid his ex-wife something like $35 billion. And he's now hooking up with a woman called Sanchez, who has a brother who got involved in some scandal involving pictures, and now he's threatening, releasing nasty information. And I just, sort of like a thought experiment. You are the richest man in the world, and you're looking for strange, and you hook up with this Sanchez woman. She's 50 years old. She has ridiculous fake breasts. Her face has been cut by plastic surgeons so many times. She doesn't look Mexican anymore. She looks Chinese, and that's the woman that you choose? Just a lack of imagination here. Surprising to me. And I have to say that Jeff's estranged wife, Mackenzie, she kept herself in tip-top shape. Far more attractive woman than Sanchez. So, Black Lives Matter. Yeah, Jeff Bezos is definitely down with that. He's not down with all lives matter. Not at all. Now, the fact that this insurrection in America has led to a tremendous appreciation in Jeff Bezos's net worth, I suppose that's not really important. A woman was upset by a banner on the retail's website that reads Black Lives Matter. And in her email, the customer told Bezos, I am for everyone voicing their opinions and standing up for what you believe in, but for your company to blast this on your website is very offensive to me. All lives matter. Bezos replied, I have to disagree with you. Black Lives Matter doesn't mean other lives don't matter. Black Lives Matter speaks to racism and the disproportionate risk that black people face in our law enforcement and justice system. Well, that's a lie. It's an outright lie. I have a 20-year-old son, and I simply don't worry that he might be choked to death while being detained one day. It's not something I worry about. Black parents can't stay the same. Bezos' support for Black Lives Matter hasn't kept Amazon grocery subsidiary Whole Foods from being vandalized, the Daily Mail reported. In Manhattan, graffiti on one boarded up Whole Foods story read, Guillotine for Bezos. In Los Angeles, looters smashed through the doors of a Whole Foods. Again, Jeff Bezos is one of these modern ristos who thinks that sucking up to the mob is going to save him from revolution. And he could be in for a very nasty surprise. Let's go back to the chat, see what's going on there. Philip Daniel says it's time for us to all leave the U.S., return to Europe, let the pure angelic beings create the American utopia that they believe they are genetically predisposed to do so without white people influence. That's quite a despairing statement there. He previously said America exhausts me. Poland or Hungary sounds nice right now. And I've heard these arguments. And what I've heard and seen tell me that Poland and Hungary do sound quite nice right now, but I'm neither Polish nor Hungarian. And to move halfway around the world into a civilization in which one is a total outsider, especially Hungary, which is a language which most non-Hungarians find impossible to learn. No, I just don't see it, particularly people who are middle-aged, say. I just think that people should stay and fight in the places where they are from. Stand in the place where you live, as that old REM song has it. Very catchy tune. Orkanbek Sultanov says, rename it English Bantu. Well, it already has a name. It's called Ebonics. And it was about 20 years ago that we were told that, no, Ebonics is perfectly legitimate, and to say otherwise is racist. William Hicks says, can't believe the spectacle of these mocha latte sipping white suburban fake SJWs, peace activists, my ass. Speaking English is viewed as white, says Chogokin 666. Yeah, I guess it is. And I'm just, I came across this Hindu woman in the media. She has some interview show. She's referring to people as y'all. And I guess it's their attempt to, see, Hindus, they're just like blacks because they're just so, don't just shut up. Okay, just shut up. But no, we have all of these people in my own country of Canada. Saying y'all. Well, if you're not black and you're not a Southron, don't say y'all. Let's see. YT says, I'm whiter than white. Claire Koss says, the matriarchy is responsible for this mess, so restore the patriarchy. I understand the sentiment, but it's not something that You know, women have had the vote for 100 years, and women have dominated households in terms of decisions with regard to spending and such like for generations and generations. And most men in the United States and the West generally are terrified of disagreeing with their wives or girlfriends. This is going to take time. Okay. Mr. Chuck the Buck Norris, how long until whites have to go to camps? Well, you see, you should look to Canada for what's going to happen. It will simply be made clear to you that you cannot have an opinion outside the mainstream. More than that, you must show your full-throated approval of everything that's going on. For instance, by marching in gay pride parades, and preferably more than one. If you step outside of the lines, your life is over. That's simple. Your life is over. Stockwell Day, former provincial and federal cabinet minister who was making a lot of money doing flackery after he left politics, his life is over now because he made an ill-considered comment talking about how he understood racial tensions because he'd been bullied as a child for wearing glasses. I don't know. It's a sort of silly thing. Oh, yes, I've suffered too. Well, everyone suffers in life. That is the nature of life. But not that long ago, it was really considered to be shameful for people, especially men, to play the poor-mouthing, as they call it in Ireland. Oh, let me tell you about my life. Your life was luxury compared to mine. It's been a joke in Ireland for, generations, that their fondness for this. But no, Stockwell Day, he was bullied for wearing glasses. Yes, it sounds absolutely brutal. Phlegmatica says the marketplace of ideas can stay irrational longer than your country can stay solvent. That is absolutely true. Donald Robertson says Biden's vice president should expect to be president within 6 months of taking over. Just in terms of the hilarity that would ensue, it's got to be Stacey Abrams. It has just got to be Stacey Abrams. Of course, Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris would be very amusing too, because that woman cannot brook disagreement of any kind. Let's see what else we got here. Spiracy says a lot of foreign people drop the G off of ing, making them sound Southern. Media Hit says Lily Singh, the Canadian Hindu Dindu TV. She's a Sikh, of course. And luckily she is. Are you talking about Lily Singh? I believe I mentioned her in the past. I'm just glad she's not in my country anymore. That she's gone. Canadian politics is absolutely dominated by Sikhs because of block voting and, let's say, irregularities. And the fact that Sikhs actually dare to suggest that they are in any way discriminated against in Canada, again, it is both hilarious and infuriating. Oh, let's get some cancel culture in here. I talked about Stockwell Day. Reebok and athletes cut ties with CrossFit after founder Greg Glassman tweeted something bad in response to racism being declared a critical public health issue. Oh, these experts they've had their time, and more than their time. The experts need to shut up. Reebok and athletes around the world have cut ties with CrossFit after founder Greg Glassman tweeted, "It's Floyd 19, after the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation said racism and discrimination is a public health issue that needs an urgent response. I don't know anything. I don't even know what CrossFit is. I'd never heard of Greg Glassman before today, but I'm thinking, I like this guy. The IHME research firm, and you know that they are Bill Gates adjacent and responsible, to a large part responsible for the COVID-19 panic. It had tweeted a statement from its director, Christopher Murray, who said that IHME commits to researching racial disparities in a range of areas, including the differential impacts of COVID-19. Differential? Why not just different? Glassman, who is also the chief executive of CrossFit, replied on Saturday, quote, "It's Floyd 19. And on Sunday, he followed up the tweet with, "Your failed model quarantined us, and now you're going to model a solution to racism." As I say, I like this guy. Quarantine alone is accompanied in every age and under all political regimes by an undercurrent of suspicion, distrust, and riots. Thanks. The backlash against Glassman's tweet was swift, with many athletes and sponsors immediately distancing themselves. By Monday, approximately 230 affiliate gyms wanted nothing to do with the brand, including Rogue Fitness, which has provided equipment for the CrossFit Games since 2010. Glassman frantically backtracked on Sunday, tweeting via the CrossFit account, "I, CrossFit HQ, and the CrossFit community will not stand for racism. I made a mistake by the words I chose yesterday. My heart is deeply saddened by the pain it caused. It was a mistake, not racist, but a mistake. Don't apologize. It's too late. It is not going to save you." Now, you understand that obviously CrossFit's business was devastated by the quarantine, by the lockdown, which we now know with the WHO's remarkable admission about the transmission of COVID-19 that is completely uncalled for. And now these same experts are saying, "Oh yeah, put us in charge of racism." Well, you know, if their racism models are as good as their COVID-19 models, I expect them to tell us that, 500,000 blacks are killed by the police every year, or will be killed by the police next year, unless there are systemic changes. I mean, just the effrontery of these people. Yeah, we wrecked the world, and it was based on shoddy data and crummy models. But how about give us power over everything now? Give us power over politics. Give us power over speech. Reebok, on the other hand, was clear about its decision to stand with the black community. Without the black community, Reebok would not exist. America would not exist. We're not asking you to buy our shoes. We're asking you to walk in someone else's, boo-grown hiss. To stand in solidarity, to find our common ground of humanity. Okay. So who else has been canceled? Oh, the Flash actor, Hartley Sawyer. It's a show that I've never seen. It's on the CW, which is a network I never watch. He's fired after his racist, misogynist, and homophobic tweets resurface. One tweet from 2012, it was 8 years ago, this said the only thing keeping the actor from doing mildly racist tweets was knowing Al Sharpton would never stop complaining. Yes, he's been on the CW series for 3 years, playing Ralph Dibny. He issued an official apology for the past tweets in an Instagram post on May 30th, saying the tweets were meant with an intent of humor. Well, that was your first mistake there, Hartley. Yeah, let's see. Out at dinner and just exposed myself as a racist again was one of his tweets. And there's some juvenile tweets about violence that I won't repeat, but we've canceled that bad man. Does that make people feel better? As I mentioned previously, the New York Times is in absolute turmoil because of a woke rebellion amongst its millennial employees, and someone called Linda Q, Q-I-U, she's very, very unhappy. Very, very unhappy with Donald Trump. Yep. Millennial, all right. I'm looking at her Twitter account. And apparently there's not been enough fact-checking. Hey Jack, at Jack, you should also look at these tweets from real Donald Trump. And it's illustrated with a picture of a woman, a young woman, a white young woman, staring at a laptop and looking distressed because words wound. She writes, Twitter and its chief executive, Jack Dorsey, placed warnings on 3 of President Donald Trump's tweets last week, taking a measured but hotly debated step to place some limit on the president's use of social media to spread falsehoods and incite his followers. How about you ain't black? If you don't vote for the Democrats, you ain't black. That seems kind of incendiary to me, actually. Twitter attached labels refuting to, Kingsley Amos used to talk about the dictionary habit and how people need to get the dictionary habit. Disagreeing with Donald Trump on voter fraud and saying that mail-in ballots are not going to lead to increased fraud because so-and-so said so. That is not what refuting means. The word she wanted to use, I think, would be rebutting. It restricted one that implied that protesters in Minneapolis could be shot, but it left countless others unchallenged, including those baselessly insinuating that Joe Scarborough had killed a former staff member. A New York Times review of the president's 139 Twitter posts from Sunday, May 24th to Saturday, May 30th, found at least 26 contained clearly false claims, including 5 about mail-in voting that were not flagged, 5 of promoting the false conspiracy theory about Scarborough, and 3 about Twitter itself. Another 24 were misleading, lacked context, or traded in innuendo. This is her job. Linda Q's job at the New York Times is she's a fact checker. And this goes on for hundreds of words. Baseless claims about ongoing protests. Oh, they're baseless. So Trump has an opinion, and presumably Linda Q has a different opinion. Yeah? And? So? What? But no, Twitter must silence, or at least fact check, Trump harder, because a millennial at the New York Times is upset. Michael Tracy's been carrying on at great length about this. Obviously, I've noticed this going back more than 10 years, 15 years or whatever, that the people who've been hired to work for newspapers are not the kind of people who would have been hired in the past. When you're talking about a major newspaper like the New York Times, typically people work their way up by working at regional papers, and you would see the same thing in Britain. You didn't get to work for the Times or the Telegraph straight out of the gate. But now they're hiring people straight out of the gate. These people have no life experience whatsoever. Curiously, they don't seem to have much of a sense of curiosity about the world. They know what's what, and it's that simple. And if you disagree with them, you are a horrible, horrible person who must be punished. I suspect that they know absolutely nothing about the history of their country, and they don't care, because as far as they're concerned, America began when they showed up or when their parents showed up. So, I don't know, sometime in the 1980s, sometime in the 1990s. Everything that happened before that is just absolutely boring, except for slavery, of course, which ended in 1865. It was 155 years ago. Which is a long time. Now, I've said previously that most people cannot comprehend numbers larger than 1,000. I'm beginning to suspect that most people, or at least most journalists, cannot comprehend numbers larger than 100. Interesting suggestion at RT from an Irish journalist, Jason O'Toole. Twitter needs Trump more than Trump needs Twitter. Why real Donald Trump should do a Joe Rogan to punish the social media giant. After they stuck fact-check warnings on 2 of his posts, the U.S. president has vowed he won't allow Twitter to stifle free speech, but instead of just regulating them, he should really hurt them by defecting to another platform. Joe Biden was bang on the money when he recently christened Donald Trump with the nickname President Tweety. Terrible meme. The president's social media outpourings might be Looney Tunes stuff on many occasions, But even though the far duller Barack Obama might have more followers, the current U.S. Commander-in-Chief is the biggest box office draw for Twitter. After less than 4 years in the Oval Office, the Donald, who even has a Wikipedia page dedicated to his Twitter obsession, has been the cause of more social media firestorms than most normal folk have had hot dinners. Every time he tweets something completely outrageous while munching on a McDonald's McMuffin in the morning or a Big Mac or filet-o-fish at night, it's easy to imagine the top Twitter shareholders rubbing their hands in glee as they watch their stock skyrocket on the CNBC Twitter. As former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer once agreed during an hour-long conversation I had with him in 2018, a tweet from Donald Trump is worth a lot. It's a no-brainer, too. We're talking here about a U.S. president whose social media interaction is unscripted, which makes it unpredictable and exciting stuff, just like reality TV, but with more bang for your buck, because it's the actual so-called leader of the free world without a friggin' self-censor switch. Most politicians would ask you to draft a tweet or to draft a statement or a message and then say, what do you think of this? Let's talk about it. He just did it. And it was a different dynamic than I was ever used to, Spicer told me, adding, he gets up, he tweets, and people are used to that becoming part of the dialogue. Trump's spat with Twitter this week has got me thinking, what if, in a worst-case nightmare scenario for the social media giant, Trump becomes royally pissed off with them and decides to jump ship to a rival like Instagram or Facebook? Just like Joe Rogan getting fed up with YouTube censorship and signing with Spotify, should Trump take to another platform with a vengeance, perhaps something really alternative like Gab, that platform would immediately gain a massive following and legitimacy at the Twitter brand's expense. Or better still, seeing as Trump likes to portray himself as a brilliant entrepreneur, what if he went one step further and created his own social media platform that allowed him to make up his own rules, literally, as he went along? In such a scenario, it's easy to imagine Twitter's stock plummeting, and they would lose a vast amount of subscribers to whichever social site Trump might choose next, probably on a whim too, knowing him. After all, as Trump might eloquently put it himself, 80.3 million followers is, well, a hell of a lot of followers, especially when you're only following 43 people yourself. It would unquestionably be a mega success if Trump created his own social networking site, because with just a few phone calls, or better still, a few tweets, he could have others like Kanye West and his missus joining him. Regardless of what you think of him, Trump is probably the only celebrity in the world whose daily tweets people would go so far as coughing up cash to read if he put up a paywall. Again, if he's reading this himself, I'd strongly advise against charging, because Twitter is the ultimate free advertising tool. I like this suggestion. Oh, let's get back to sports here. And Colin Kaepernick is all over the news because what, do we really think that he's going to make a comeback? Because he's doing pretty well. You know, he's not getting thumped every week as a quarterback does. On Twitter, again, Trump on Twitter, Trump asked if NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is okay with players kneeling during the national anthem this season. It appears that NFL players will most likely be allowed to take a knee on the field during the presentation of the American flag and playing of the Star-Spangled Banner, according to a top league source. They won't be fined or disciplined for demonstrating for racial justice this season, said the source. We anticipate taking the same approach we've taken for the last number of years. No discipline will be enacted. No player has ever been fined. The league is working closely with the NFL Players Association on developing the anthem strategy for the upcoming 2020 season. The NFL's apparent defiance of the president sets up a potential rematch of the battle between Trump and the NFL that played out over the 2017 and 2018 seasons. On June the 7th, Trump harkened back to his comments from September 2017 when he called on NFL owners to fire son-of-a-bitch players who disrespected the American flag. Trump's direct attack on the league inspired hundreds of players, coaches, and even owners like Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys to kneel on the field. Quote, could it even be remotely possible that in Roger Goodell's rather interesting statement of peace and reconciliation, he was intimating that it would now be okay for players to kneel or not to stand for the national anthem, thereby disrespecting our country and our flag, unquote, Trump tweeted. Okay. Here's the way I see the NFL is this. that the NFL is a very rich league because it has a lot of fans who see a bunch of players who are not representative of themselves in any conceivable way. But there's a compromise there, that the national anthem's played at the beginning or before every game, and the players stand in respect of the national anthem. So the fans think, well, you know, I read about their gun offenses and their drug offenses and the like, but they do love America. They are patriotic Americans. And now the NFL has decided to let its players, or a majority of them or close to it, demonstrate that they don't love America, that they in fact hate America. So why would the NFL expect Joe and Mrs. Six-Pack continue to go to games, which are very expensive? It's not just the tickets, but the food and drink, merchandise, parking is very, very expensive. And of course, you watch an NFL game on TV, and it lasts about 3 hours. And most of that, of course, is commercials. So why do you want to sit through 3 hours of commercials to watch a bunch of people who hate America and probably hate you too if you are white? I think the NFL has made an absolutely disastrous decision here. And we saw that after Trump declared war on the NFL 3 years ago, that both the TV ratings and the number of people going to the games has plummeted. There are other reasons for this, of course. I mean, America is surfeited with sports. But Trump may have succeeded in something huge, which is that sports ball, as people on the right like to call it, has had a chokehold on American culture for decades. And Trump may be responsible for ending that. Oh, let's move to Britain briefly here. I tagged the statue of Churchill because he's a confirmed racist. Defiant Black Lives Matter protester says he desecrated the wartime PM's plinth because he fought the Nazis to protect colonialism, not for people of color. Masked Man, he's a black man, although the Daily Mail does not mention this, with a London accent, spoke to the BBC and said he did it because he is pissed off. Phrase "was racist" had been added in spray paint, leaving monument reading "Churchill was a racist." He told the BBC, "You can't enslave people and be like, yeah, let's be peaceful, let's talk. It doesn't work like that." Churchill became prime minister in 1940? He was prime minister from 1940 to 1945, and then again for a brief period in the 1950s. Slavery was abolished throughout the British Empire in, I believe, 1833. But I don't expect this young man, this young hooligan, to know anything about British history, because that's not why he or his family was brought to Britain. Actually, it was the Conservative government in the 1950s who decided that I guess Britons were being paid too much. So let's start importing people from the Caribbean. And how has that worked out for Britain? In his famous speech, 1968, Enoch Powell said that blacks in Britain would shortly have the whip hand, and now they do. Of course, Enoch Powell, Peter Hitchens tells us, was a wicked, wicked, wicked man, because telling the truth about race is wicked. Britain is barely British. London is certainly not an English city anymore. And yeah, let's go after. I am not an admirer of Winston Churchill. Very much not an admirer of Winston Churchill for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, let's blame him for slavery. I'm going to point out again that Hilaire Belloc said that slavery was the default condition of humanity. And of course, it is. That white people were taken in the millions as slaves by the Romans, typically Gauls and Germans. And of course, millions of white people were taken as slaves by Arab slave traders over a period of hundreds of years. I don't see the Arabs or the Muslims apologizing for that. But no, our society is so ignorant that most people actually seem to believe that it's only black people who've ever been slaves. Let's see, what does Boris Johnson have to say? Well, he believes that Britain is not a racist country and backed police to arrest any Black Lives Matter supporter who attacked officers, defaced Churchill's statue, or threw Bristol's Edward Colston statue into the city's harbor. Okay, here's the official statement. The PM doesn't doubt that there continues to be discrimination and racism, but does not agree that this is a racist country. We have made very significant progress on the issue, but there remains more to do. Oh, there's always more to do. And we will not be complacent. No, we must never be complacent in our efforts to stamp out racism and discrimination where it happens. And I would really like to see Boris Johnson or any of the members of his government actually explain to us what racism means. Again, if you have a situation where in London, where white people are terrified of black people, again, they're terrified of them physically, and they are terrified of saying anything which might be seen to be offensive to them. So if there's systemic discrimination in Britain, who is doing it to whom? That would be my question. In stupid world news, this is from the Collider on June the 4th. And this is from a man who's called Tahir Duckett, which is a strange name to be sure. And I looked him up, and he's an actual man, like he's a grown man. And he has a piece, Do We Need the Police? Steven Universe and She-Ra suggest we don't. These are cartoons, okay? It may be difficult for many of us to begin to imagine public safety and accountability that does not rely on police and prisons, but two modern cartoons, Rebecca Sugar's Steven Universe and Noelle Stevenson's She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, are both replete with abolitionist themes that can inspire us to commit to new ways of keeping each other safe. In Steven Universe, Steven and the other crystal gems use bubbling to hold in stasis the gem monsters they defeat. Unlike incarceration, bubbling doesn't actively harm the gem monsters, but Steven recognizes as early as Season 1's Monster Buddies that the crystal gems should seek to heal the corruption, described by Garnet as a tear in the fabric of the mind that causes gems to turn into monsters rather than bubble them indefinitely. In Season 3's Monster Reunion, Steven discovers that the gem monsters were corrupted by experiencing violence, an analogy that holds true in the real world, where experiencing childhood violence makes people more likely to commit acts of violence themselves. The quest to heal and release the corrupted gems becomes a major narrative arc of the show, concluding in Change Your Mind, when Steven and the Diamonds, who were responsible for the violence that created the corruption in the first place, work together to begin to repair the harm they've caused. What's the other one? She-Ra. In She-Ra, the protagonists similarly avoid a retributive response to characters who engaged in harmful behavior. Both Scorpia and later Catra, major foils for Adora and her friends throughout the first 3 seasons, are welcomed into the rebellion once they make a commitment to abandon the Horde. And just as in Steven Universe, there's no clearly delineated division between bad antagonists and good protagonists. Entrapta joins the rebellion, but often seriously hurts her friends and allies with her blind pursuit of technological advancement. Glimmer's willingness to use the Heart of Etheria weapon against the wishes of her allies in Season 4 exposes the planet to incredible danger. This is not to say that the reintegration of any of these characters back into their communities is effortless or simple. And I'm just going to check out this fellow. I believe it's a fellow, Tahir Duckett. Okay. This is a real person. and he is a black man who I would guess is in his 1930s. Tahir Duckett is the founder and director of Rethink. After a decade spent directing the Young Worker Program at the AFL-CIO and managing a program that mobilized millions of workers in 20 states, Tahir started Rethink because he believes that the key to preventing sexual violence is to build a culture of consent during adolescence. He develops and delivers programming on healthy masculinity, consent, empathy, and communication both through adolescents and adults. He graduated magna cum laude from Georgetown University Law Center and holds degrees in political science and religion from Emory University. Again, this is a man who is writing this. His pin tweet says, "Hey, y'all. I'm writing a book on alternatives to police prisons being pushed by the communities most affected. I need some help. 1, connect me to smart organizers, activists, and thinkers. 2, if you read this book, retweet and follow so I can show publishers there's an audience." And here he is carrying on about evil cops lying and the like. Again, this is what's happened to adults now. And the celebrities, of course, are all on board for Black Lives Matters. They have been, in many cases, putting their money where their mouths are. Again, from the Mail, Tucker Carlson is slammed by celebrities including Lil Nas X, Seth Rogen, and Halsey for lying after he reeled off a list of stars funding the chaos and paying to get violent rioters out of jail. You know, it's not always been true that celebrities have been good-looking people, but I've been reading or seeing a lot of stories about, what's his name, Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live. He's hideous. He's absolutely hideous. And he's not funny. And if he complains that he's a joke on Saturday Night Live because literally everyone expects him to OD in the next week or so, and yet we've decided to make an icon of someone like Pete Davidson. I guess it is a cult of ugliness. Pete Davidson and Lizzo and Lena Dunham and all the rest of them. Hey, remember when celebrities were good looking? Okay, Tucker Carlson said big companies, cynical, soulless, craven corporations like Pepsi, Intel, and Airbnb are funding this chaos. They're giving money to Black Lives Matter, which is pushing to defund the police. But it isn't just major corporations that are fueling all of this. Celebrities are too, by paying to get violent rioters out of jail. With footage of rioting and flames behind him, Carlson specifically called out rapper Lil Nas X, saying he urged his $4.7 million Twitter followers to donate to bail groups in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and elsewhere. He added, imagine if he had used those followers instead to help small businesses destroyed by the riots he helped incite. But the Grammy Award winner hit back, tweeting, quote, this man just lied and told millions of people on national television that I was inciting riots. You can't make this up, unquote. And Chrissy Teigen, who donated $200,000 for bail, amusingly, they misspelled her name. Oh, and I don't know, someone called Asen Tarabi commented Tucker Carlson thinks he's outing celebrities. He is outing celebrities. Actor Seth Rogen added, I think that when white supremacists are bothered by your actions, that's probably a good thing. And he then there's a bunch of swearing. And then from Halsey, a bunch of swearing. Isn't Halsey the tri-bi? Let's see, biracial, bisexual, and bipolar. That's how she used to describe herself. She sounds like a delightful young woman. Let's see. Oh, yes. Comedian Rom Delaney, who appeared on the screen with actress Cynthia Nixon, joked, Tucker Carlson not enthused about my new collaboration with Cynthia Nixon, Antifa Virgin Dad. I'd like to have sex in the city. I don't know whether that's real or not, but Steve Carell, someone I used to like, is part of this. Harry Styles, just hurry up and get the transitioning over, okay? You are boring. us. Okay. Oh, I wanted to talk about Ice Cube. He's been in the news, although not as much as he should be. Media's decided to cover up for him for some reason. Have you seen his Twitter feed? He's gone off the deep end. He became famous or infamous with his first combo called NWA, and I won't tell you what NWA means because I'd probably get into trouble. And their album in 1988, Straight Outta Compton. It's my understanding that there's no more hood in Compton, that the Mexicans have pushed out all the blacks. So Ice Cube, he leaves NWA in 1989, and then just for years it was all dissing about how they're all homosexuals and they wear women's clothing and they are being sodomized by Jews, etc., etc., etc. Also Koreans. He really doesn't like Koreans. And then, in a strange twist, he got involved in movies. But then there was an attempt to make him a cuddly figure for middle America. Strange choice, I would have thought. But now he's carrying on about the Jews again. And that the Jews apparently are responsible for all of the ills of the black community. And it seems a little dated, that meme, because, yeah, there used to be Jewish shopkeepers in the inner city. They left a long time ago, decades ago. So people are talking again about Ice Cube's second solo album, which is called Death Certificate, which shows a body, and it's toe-tagged Uncle Sam, and the body is covered with an American flag. So I guess it gives you an idea of his patriotism. And there are two songs in particular that caused trouble. One of them was called No Vaseline, which you might be able to guess is about forcible sodomy. And the ex-NWA band members, apparently the Jews were doing this to them, and they were quite pleased by it. And another one there, Black Korea. Yeah, and he does not like Korean shopkeepers. These two songs were removed from the British version of the album. But now, and I brought up the lyrics to No Vaseline, and I don't think that I can quote any of them. Okay, I really don't. Them ends, Dre and Yella used to wear lipstick and lace. Yeah, okay. It goes on like that. It goes on and on. This is from the Allgemeine. Yesterday, rapper Ice Cube blasted on social media for posting anti-Semitic image. You should be ashamed. Rapper Ice Cube came under fire on Saturday for posting an image on Twitter that's been widely panned as anti-Semitic and refusing to remove it despite repeated requests by Jewish activists. He's been tweeting support for the Black Lives Matter movement following the police killing of 46-year-old George Floyd in Minneapolis on May the 25th. Then on Saturday morning, he uploaded the image of a group of sinister-looking men, some with large hook noses, sitting around a board game with one full bearded gentleman counting money. The board rests on the bowed, naked backs of another group of men. They're black men. Written across the image is, all we have to do is stand up and their little game is over. Ice Cube, who is 50, captioned the image, F the new normal until they fix the old normal. That doesn't make any sense. People have remonstrated with him over this, and he claimed to be fighting Nazis. So it was okay. The caricature first appeared as a mural in London's East End. Do you remember what I told you about murals? Murals are a signifier, and what they signify is you don't want to live here. A mural in London's East End has sparked a controversy in 2018 after Britain's Labour Party leader at the time, Jeremy Corbyn, voiced support for the artist Mir One, aka Kalen Ackerman. Corbyn later apologized, and the image was subsequently scrubbed. According to journalist Michael Segalov, the iconography mirrors anti-Semitic propaganda used by Hitler and the Nazis to whip up hatred that led to the massacre of millions of Jews. This extends to the table these figures are sat at, resting on human bodies, as the Nazis also depicted. Ice Cube's hostile attitude towards the Jewish community has an extensive history. In 1991, the Simon Wiesenthal Center condemned his album Death Certificate for including many racist lyrics. One song on the album even called for the murder of a Jewish music industry figure. In 2015, he allegedly had his entourage physically attack a rabbi who he bumped into in Detroit. Ice Cube, the rabbi said, unleashed a string of anti-Semitic epithets at him for wearing a yarmulke. And last month, the rapper offered warm birthday wishes to infamous anti-Semitic minister Louis Farrakhan. I was looking at his feed, his Twitter feed, Ice Cube's Twitter feed, and the pinned tweet very strongly suggested that Ice Cube is a black Israelite, that blacks are the real Jews. I don't know if you're ever familiar, if you've ever run into these people. I have run into them in downtown Victoria, of all places. And it's rather impressive that they can talk for 10 minutes without pauses. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And of course, it's all crazy town, you know. But so yeah, maybe he's a black Israelite. Yeah, claiming to be a Jew in order to own the Jews. Now, let's see. There is a woman who, again, I'd never heard of. Her name is Sky Jackson. She's a Disney star. Oh, and she's exposing corruption, evildoing. I suppose she could start with Disney. One looks at the number of young men and women who have been molested, often for years, on shows on Disney and Nickelodeon, but these people point figures at the rest of us. Online racists have managed to hide their hateful comments behind social media's cloak of anonymity, but Sky Jackson is ready to reveal them now. The 18-year-old Disney star has been outing racists, most of them teenagers, on her Twitter account in recent days while posting their offending content. So far, she even garnered a response from New Jersey's Rowan University, which pledged to investigate the student she posted about. Sky revealed her strategy about sharing racist remarks and posts in a text post on her Twitter and Instagram. During this sensitive time, I've seen some horrific statements and social media videos made by some Caucasian teens/young adults. She began her statement. Let me say this. If I see you post it, I will expose you. If you think you're big and bad enough to say it, I will most definitely put your own words on blast. The actress also warned the subjects of her venom not to complain about their racist statements being made public. So another member of America's junior young volunteer, Stasi, and she's already had to backtrack on at least one occasion because she says that she outed someone as a racist, but she was given incorrect information. That is to say, obviously there are many people that share the same names in America. It's a very dangerous thing to do, but of course she is on the side of good. So, I thought that I would, in the spirit of exposing racism, I thought that I would, give her a heads up and a shout out, as the kids are saying, or they used to say. So I sent her a tweet yesterday. Dear Sky Jackson, I would like to report an entertainer who calls himself Ice Cube. His real name is O'Shea Jackson. He hates Koreans and Jews and has been saying terrible things about them for decades. He is also very homophobic. Thank you in advance. #expose racism. She hasn't got back to me. I understand, she's obviously very busy, but I mean, given the things that this Ice Cube fellow has been saying, and we're going back decades now. I suppose we can expect his comeuppance pretty quickly, right? Come on, people. I mean, he's going to be canceled because of this, right? Just no, of course he's not. No, of course he's not. But okay. Bob Paxton says KMG talks for 2 hours. Canuck privilege. Okay. Metal Mike, listen to Louis Farrakhan's sermons. They're mostly against the Jews. I have heard Farrakhan's speech. I've also heard him play Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto. He did this some years ago, saying, here I am playing. Apparently he was quite a good violinist when he was younger. Playing, so I'm playing music by a Jew. So that goes to prove that I don't hate the Jews. It's very strange, of course, because Felix Mendelssohn was a Lutheran. His grandfather had been the Moses Mendelssohn, the great Jewish philosopher. But Felix Mendelssohn was a very devout Lutheran. But no. Ricardo Williams says, how large is KMG's hotel room? I've never seen a desk or chair that is that close to the hotel room door before. It's fairly large. There's 3 people in it. But there's some weird things about it. I suppose this desk is weird, but the bathroom is exceedingly small. That when I walk in, I have to sort of pivot around the door to be fully in. And the best part is, the sink is not in the bathroom. The sink is in an alcove next to the bathroom. So then I have to use the facilities, leave the bathroom, wash my hands, walk back into the bathroom to dry my hands. It's odd. It's just, it's really, really odd. Okay, so what else we got? Oh no, not Seth Rogen. What is that guy's appeal? Actually, okay, so he's a big fat guy with a beard and he's a stoner. And am I missing anything? Of course, he's associated with Judd Apatow, as is Pete Davidson. I saw a Seth Rogen movie. I guess I've seen several. I saw one called Pineapple Express, and it has Amber Heard in it. And Seth Rogen is supposed to be this loser character who's miserable about his life. His girlfriend is Amber Heard. I mean, like, how bad could your life be if Amber Heard is your girlfriend? But then, I don't know, is there a lot of marijuana involved on the set in these films? Because there's a plot involving Amber Heard and her parents being placed in danger, and then they just forget about them. Like, in the last 30 minutes of the movie, they're not there. It's like, oh, shit, we ran out of time. Oh, yeah, everyone will be baked. So no one will notice. Yeah, the NWA manager, Jerry Heller, was mentioned by Ned Rooks. What? There's been a documentary about him and them. Ricardo Williams says, I'm going to need you to take a knee and wash my feet, white boy. Yeah, we've been seeing that as well. And I'm kind of thinking that Pope Francis, he might use his personal magisterium to just declare George Floyd a saint. Because, Father Jim, Society of Jesus, explicitly compared George Floyd to Jesus Christ last week. Again, my position is it seemed fairly clear that excessive force was used on George Floyd. George Floyd is not a hero. He was a career criminal and a felon who took part in a home invasion where he shoved a gun in the stomach of a pregnant woman and demanded money and drugs. And there was no money and drugs in the house. He has the proverbial record as long as your arm, and he was getting his life together. Well, being high as a kite on fentanyl and meth and attempting to pass a counterfeit $20 bill does not sound to me like getting your life together. I mean, he was like 50 years old or something, a little late in the day for that kind of behavior. Metal Mike says, "Take Me to the Greek was remotely funny, but only because of the English comedian. Rogan is not funny." What's this? Russell Brand? I just find him intolerable. Absolutely. Yes, I'm going to talk like a Regency dandy. That's it. That's what I got. Okay. Yeah, I want to talk about J.K. Rowling. Wrap this up. I was talking about FU money last week, and J.K. Rowling is said to be a billionaire or close to it. And that is definitely FU money. And she is taking the terribly controversial position that only women can menstruate and only women can give birth to children. Yeah, shocking, right? Shocking transphobia. From the Associated Press, J.K. Rowling has hit back at claims she is transphobic for questioning the phrase "people who menstruate" to describe women. Now, the mayor of Toronto, John Tory, the fag end of the Canadian aristocracy, and by fag end, I mean like a used cigarette. Oh, yeah, he loves Black Lives Matter, and he loves drag artistes. And it was, National or City Menstruation Day in Toronto a week ago. And he very carefully avoided using the words women or woman in there. Again, menstruators or people who menstruate. Rowling drew outrage. Oh, outrage Saturday on Twitter. I mean, how long is the media going to be able to get away with this? That you can say vanilla ice cream is best on Twitter, and this will cause outrage. Okay? People will wish you dead or the like because you would express an opinion on vanilla ice cream versus all the other different kinds of ice creams, because that is the nature of Twitter. Anyway, Rowling criticized an opinion piece published by the website Devix, a media platform for the global development community that used the phrase "people who menstruate." "I'm sure there used to be a word for those people," Rowling tweeted. "Someone help me out. Wumban, Wimpund, Wumud." In response, Rowling has now said she respects every trans person's rights to live any way that feels authentic and comfortable to them. She wanted to say she would march if you were discriminated against on the basis of being trans. At the same time, my life has been shaped by being female. I do not believe it's hateful to say so. She wrote, digging the hole deeper for herself, "If sex isn't real, then there's no same-sex attraction. If sex isn't real, the lived reality of women globally is erased. I know and love trans people, but erasing the concept of sex removes the ability of many to meaningfully discuss their lives. It isn't hate to speak the truth," unquote. Rowling's tweets caused a firestorm of responses from the alphabet people community and others who were upset with her words. A Harry Potter fan group tweeted its disapproval of Rowling's post and encouraged followers to donate to a group that supports transgender women. GLAAD issued a response on Twitter calling Rowling's tweets inaccurate and cruel. The advocacy organization dedicated to alphabet people equality then asked those upset by the author's comments to support organizations that help transgender people. So let's go back to gay marriage, homosexual marriage. What's the harm? People said. Well, there's all sorts of harm, but here we see with this debate, this Rowling debate, one specific kind of harm. Marriage is by definition the union of a man and a woman. And in some cultures, a man and several women. But no, man and woman. Okay, that is marriage. So when you say that marriage doesn't have to be man and woman, that it can be man and woman, you are causing violence to language and you are disordering the universe. So now you have these people who are literally working themselves into a frenzy, screaming hysterically. How dare you say that only women can menstruate? No, only women can menstruate. How dare you say that only women can have children? No, only women can have children. Only women have a uterus. Only women have fallopian tubes. And no, that's not, but no, you see, so if we they got away with saying that marriage wasn't the union of a man and a woman, and now they're simply seeking to dismantle all language. This is not the first time that Rowling has come under fire from her fans, as in March 2018, she liked a tweet which referred to transgender women as men in dresses. The comment was posted during a row about the status of transgender women in the Labour Party. Remember when the Labour Party used to be about working men? At the time, a spokesperson for JK told the London Sun that the like was a clumsy and middle-aged moment. The former charity researcher also faced criticism from her fellow celebrities, with actress Sarah Paulson, a lesbian, by the way, 45, boldly telling her to shut up. Jonathan Van Ness of Queer Eye also shared his thoughts on her remarks, highlighting that transgender people are discriminated against every day. They're dying. We're fighting for Black people and trans people, and you're doing this. Former TV presenter and actress Jamila Jamil, who is, in my opinion, the most annoying person in Britain, meanwhile urged JK to donate to a fund in support of homeless Black trans women. Yeah. You see, I don't understand why lesbians, why is the tea there? Why is the tea there? Because these people show up and say, no, we're the real women now, and we're going to tell you what it's like to be a woman. And by the way, you have to have sex with us. That's mandatory. That's required. Because if you don't, you're guilty of transphobia. That is a really good wheeze. And I'm sure, there must be people thinking, the men thinking of a way that they could go up to women and say, you must have sex with me, or it means you're guilty of something terrible. I'm sure there are powerful minds working on that right now. So apparently, J.K. Rowling is terribly controversial for pointing out the obvious facts that women are different than men. And Jamil, who has been accused of Munchausen's syndrome, because if you look her up, apparently she suffered, in terms of poor mouthing, she's the queen. She has suffered more calamities than certainly any other woman in her 30s. I'm sure there's a few extreme examples, but seems like everything terrible has happened to this woman. And she just keeps getting in the news. She just keeps getting in the news. And of course, she keeps getting a lot of well-paid work on, what's it called? The Good Place, that terrible show she's in. Oh, Cho Chang has stepped into the debate. Katie Leung, who played Cho Chang in the Harry Potter films, has weighed in on the backlash the best-selling author has faced since she was accused of being transphobic. The fantasy scribe was attacked by the likes of alphabet people, celebrities, Jamila Jamil. Jamila Jamil calls herself queer. As far as anyone knows, Jamila Jamil has only had sexual relationships with men, and she is been involved in a sexual relationship with a man for like 4 years, and she just says, I'm queer now. Oh, is that how it works? Do you have to file a declaration or something, or is it sufficient to send out a tweet? One would think that, again, that homosexuals would object to this kind of sexual tourism, but the more the merrier, I guess. And so Katie Leung, the Scottish actress, she played Asian Witch Cho, a character Rowling has been slammed for in the past for the way she wrote her. So Cho Chang followed this up with a series of tweets linking to petitions and campaigns supporting Black alphabet people, adding the hashtag Asians for Black Lives, shifting the matter back to the global outrage following the death of American civilian George Floyd at the hands of the police. Yeah, it's all about George Floyd. It's just all about George Floyd. And here we see that same picture again of homeless Black trans women fund organized by Jesse Pratt Lopez. Cursed image. Let's see. Sign the petition. More protection for Black trans women. UK. Give us our roses while we're still here. I have no idea what that might mean. But again, there's a very concerted movement to make Black culture homosexual culture. It's just Black culture has been thoroughly colonized by the homosexuals, and I wonder whether there's going to be any room left for homosexual, for heterosexual Blacks. And I think I'll end up with this. You remember that conspiracy theory that COVID-19 was altered in a laboratory? Well, the former chief of MI6 has claimed that the coronavirus escaped from a lab in China by accident. He cited an important report from Professor Angus Dalgleish of St. George's Hospital, University of London, and Norwegian virologist Birger Sorensen, which claims the virus was manufactured in a laboratory. And, of course, Theresa Tam, whose time in the limelight is coming to an end, warns of explosive second COVID-19 wave if reopening mishandled. Hope you enjoyed your 15 minutes of fame, Dr. Tam. Oh, and I got to talk about this. Canada's new hero, Blackface Man. A man was arrested in Toronto Saturday after showing up to an anti-racism protest while wearing blackface. The man, whose name was not released by officials, was filmed getting into a shouting match with demonstrators after protest organizers asked him to leave. If I want to put this on my face, then I can put this on my face. The man can be heard saying in the clip before he was placed in custody, "You're effing disrespectful," a demonstrator shouts back, "You're a shame to all who came here." And, okay, so this man has a big smile on his face the whole time this is going on, even after he's being dragged off by the police. And I don't know if you see any stories, take a look at Toronto's finest. Yeah, they're riding bicycles and they're wearing shorts, not big boy pants, shorts. And the officer who is hauling away black-faced man is a chubby Oriental fellow who wears glasses, who appears to be about 5'4" in height. And it is absolutely hilarious this fellow is definitely striking fear in the hearts of Toronto's evil doers. So I'm going to take a final look at the chat. You see me laughing here? I've been accused on Twitter recently of being grumpy. On the contrary, I am as cheerful as the day is long. Ricardo Williams, why are Kevin's fingertips brown? Well, some of them are stained with tobacco. Yep. I smoke filterless cigarettes, or that is to say, you can't buy filterless cigarettes anymore, so I snap the filters off. So that's why. Does he use snuff? I have used snuff in the past, but snuff has pretty much been banned in my country because it is a form of flavored tobacco, and all forms of flavored tobacco have been banned in Canada. That's why they keep having to change the cigarettes. Like Pall Mall has been through about half a dozen iterations in the last 10 years because the Canadian government keeps banning this, that, and the other. Bob Paxton says trans women abortion rights. We needed it yesterday. Well, it reminds me of an old joke from National Lampoon magazine in the 1970s. They had a big gay issue with all of the things that, people needed to know about gays, or gays needed to know about themselves. And my favorite bit was gay birth control, continued on page, 79 or whatever. And of course, there's no 79 in the magazine because they don't need birth control. Let's see. Media hits. Emma Watson from the Harry Potter movies is working side by side with that activist who became trans in prison. Became trans. Gee, that sounds. Well, yeah. There's a huge scandal in the prison system where men who have been convicted of murder and rape, or assault of women, they say that they've been misgendered, that they're women, and that they demand to have their transitioning operation paid for, and they get placed in women's prisons with the results that you can easily imagine. Okay, that's the show for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would greatly appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you would like to support this show, which would be greatly appreciated at this particular time, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. And I will leave you with my traditional benediction and farewell. And in these times of social atomization and the fall of Rome, I do sincerely wish that all of you manage to find some genuine human connection in order to get through this difficult time. Good night.